Employment Law. He's a valuable resource to all of us at a time when so many of us, small and mid-sized businesses, are being forced to take, quick cost-cutting measures that often include reducing staff, reducing their salaries, changing their status, and in some cases, laying people off. So with so many businesses being affected by this shelter-in-place requirement as we try to flatten the curve, seemingly every business is being affected to some degree. And so I am pleased to welcome Sean Gentry, who's an employment law attorney with AdAstra Law Group, and to give us an update on what are the changes in the employment law that are in the pipeline. Some of them are happening as we speak, and help all of us navigate through this coronavirus-triggered crisis. And so without further ado, let me bring in Sean. Sean, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Roman. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. It's great to have you. Let me introduce you really quickly to some of the audience that might not know you. But Sean is a top-rated employment attorney. He has been selected by his peers for inclusion in Northern California Super Lawyers as a rising star from 2016 and to the present. And Sean assists employers with various sizes with compliance and human resources needs by advising them on labor laws and best practices, preparing employment documents, addressing disputes with employees, providing employer training, and now it seems like he's becoming an expert on navigating the ins and outs of the employment issues in response to COVID-19. And it's also worth mentioning that, Sean's top priority is to help his clients avoid problems that can lead to litigation. And that's one of the main reasons I really wanted him to speak with us this afternoon and really give us helpful guidance so that we can make informed employment-based decisions without creating problems for ourselves or for our employees, while taking care of our employees and ensuring that our businesses can not only survive, but continue to thrive when this crisis comes to an end. So, Sean, again, I want to thank you for taking some time to talk with us. I'm really glad we have you here today in particular because of, obviously, Congress just announced a big stimulus bill, so it's very timely. There's definitely a lot that we could talk about. But if I had to pick a place to start, I would ask, what do companies need to do if they're going to need to make layoffs in light of COVID-19, and what should we be taking into consideration?
Yeah. So what I was seeing is that I was giving the same advice over and over again to my clients the last few days or the last couple of weeks, and realized that this is sort of advice that can be helpful to everyone. And so when you're faced with a shutdown situation where the staff you have is not the staff that you need right now because either there's no customers, the work has dried up for those people to be working on, or whatever is affecting your business, there's a couple of options. And the EDD is really trying to push people away from full layoffs. But even some of my own clients already have had to make that tough choice to just lay off a large portion of their staff. And so before I get into what you should do if you're making a layoff, the three sort of options, the main options are reducing work hours substantially for some or all employees, or what I call a furlough. The EDD sometimes calls it a furlough, but they also refer to it as a temporary layoff. And what that essentially means is they're still your employees, you're still keeping track of them in your system. You won't have to retrain new hires later, but you're reducing their hours down to zero, essentially, for the time being until we all return back to our offices and customers start frequenting establishments again. And so that's what the ED is hoping people will do. But some businesses for sure are opting to do a full layoff and basically just rehire later if necessary. And one reason people are making that decision is because it can allow you to reduce your benefits overhead to some degree. And also some of the people that you have now might not be the people you need when we return to business. And business is going to look very different in 3 months than it did before all of this started. But going back to the what do you need to do, there's sort of a list of things that you have to provide employees anytime you lay them off, and not the least of which is essentially final paychecks. It's typically due on the day that you decide or that you inform the employee that they're being let go. And so if there is any outstanding wages that are owed to any employees, those have to be paid at the time of the layoff. And that includes any payout of PTO or vacation time if they've earned any but not yet used it. Although if people are working from home, or I should say if people are not working right now, they may be using their PTO and vacation time anyway, reducing that down to 0. But anyway, make sure you include that. Sick time is not something that's paid out on final termination, but you should keep track of it in your system in case you rehire that employee. You're required to reinstate sick time for any employees who return back to work with you after a layoff. And then don't forget any reimbursements employees might be owed for business expenses. In addition to that, there's an EDD handout. It's called DE2320. If you Google that, you'll find it. It's a 20 or 30 page handout. It's just a pamphlet that explains unemployment insurance benefits. The EDD requires everyone to give that to employees upon termination. And then there's a similar form regarding healthcare rights called the HIP form, HIPP, not to be confused with HIPAA, but spelled similarly. Similar acronym, but yeah, the HIP notice form, also Googleable. There's a recent update that the governor issued for that form at the end of 2019, so it's available publicly on the internet. And then, of course, if you are letting people go, that means you have to change your systems, right? So take them out of your 401k, or I should say, stop the contributions to the 401k, notify your 401k provider, notify your health plan providers, and they should take care of a lot of the other required notifications. For example, the COBRA notification that's typically required if you're eliminating a position that had a healthcare benefit. Those are kind of the big things. And if, Roman, you want me to keep going, I can talk about some lesser known considerations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is very relevant. I mean, as we speak, because they're businesses from very small kind of single employer businesses that had to turn on a dime and make a lot of changes very, very quickly. And they might not have already done all of these things or might not have known that these things existed. So whether it's a list of things that I'm happy to put them up on the screen if you want to bullet point these out, but also keeping in mind that some of the businesses hopefully in a place where they haven't had to make these layoffs just yet, but it's likely in the back of their mind. So if there's anything that we can do ahead of time to just think ahead and prepare and put things in the right order so that we don't make mistakes if we have to make those types of decisions or layoffs, but also that don't get overwhelmed with just the number of things that we all have to do. So by all means, if you could tell us more, I'm happy to put it on the screen as well.
So the things that I mentioned just a moment ago are things that need to be done at the time of the layoff. But if you're still forward looking and you're thinking a layoff might be coming, there's a couple other things that could be pitfalls, let's say pitfalls for employers. So if you're a big enough employer that you're subject to the WARN Act, to WARN, and the CalWARN Act, then there are some notifications that are required to be given well in advance of a mass layoff or a plant closure. Most businesses that I work with are not that big. Typically, I think it requires 75 employees or more who are affected by the layoff within a certain geographic area, or some substantial amount of people who are being laid off. Don't quote me on that requirement as I sit here right now. I'm blanking a little bit, but there's this WARN Act. Most small businesses don't have to comply with that, but if you do, it's a big requirement. I will note the governor is indicating some relaxation on those requirements in light of what's happening right now. So that's some good news. For example, I think the amount of notice that's required, which I believe was 60 days, is being reduced. So I just mentioned that one in passing. But for smaller businesses, there's things like severance offers that you might be making that could actually lead to some pitfalls. One thing I say to clients all the time about any major decision they're making is it should always be made objectively. So you shouldn't be picking and choosing who's subject to a layoff based on who you like the best or subjective criteria. It really should be based on defensible metrics like productivity, seniority, tenure, level of education, how long they've been with the company, if they're the best salespeople, some criteria that justifies why you're keeping some individuals and not other individuals. And this is simply to avoid claims of unfair treatment or discrimination and retaliation, which, if there's even an inadvertent bias toward one group of individuals, that can lead to legal problems down the road. So when you're planning those layoffs, make sure you look to those issues. And then if you offer severance, similarly, make sure it's a very objective policy about how you're offering severance. You're not giving more money to the people that you liked and less money to the people that you didn't like. It's really based on how long they've been with the company or some other objective metric. And if you do severance offers, be aware that if there are several employees over the age of 40 who are affected by the layoff, and you're offering some sort of compensation to one or more employees for the layoff, then there are a bunch of requirements under the Age Discrimination and Employment Act that must be met regarding how much notice is given to the employees, the amount of time they have to consider the offer. There's essentially a spreadsheet that should be given to employees that have a variety of pieces of data on it that describe who is affected by the layoff and who's not affected. And all of this is designed to make sure that older workers aren't being unfairly targeted by layoffs. And so that they have a chance to fairly consider their own situation before signing a release of claims in order to get the severance benefits. So that's something that is a pitfall that people don't always know about if they're trying to do a nice thing for their employees and offer some severance when faced with a layoff. Don't forget to cancel your benefits for the employees who are no longer working with you, or I should say notify your group plan providers. And then one other sort of underlooked issue is the issue of salary. And so if you have an employee who is on salary, which a lot of people do, the salary is designed to cover an entire work week that the employee performed work for the company. And so if you lay somebody off in the middle of the week and there's a fixed termination date, it may make sense to stop the salary at that point. But if you're just thinking about temporarily suspending the work of salaried individuals and stopping the salary payments, but you're not actually laying them off, do make sure that you pay the entire work week's worth of salary. A work week is usually Sunday to Saturday, although your policies and handbooks could say something other than that. And the issue there is if they work on a Monday, for example, and then you stop paying them on a Tuesday, that's contrary to the purpose of a salary. The salary is designed to cover a whole week's worth of work without regard to how many hours they work in any particular day. And so if you do it that way, then it could put you at risk of having misclassified them essentially. They're not meeting the salary test. So just something to keep in mind. I definitely have some clients who have salaried individuals who are going on furlough, and you can stop paying the salaries temporarily, but you just have to make sure you do it by work week by work week, and not day by day. So I just wanted to mention that as well. And so that's all I've got for the moment on the major considerations here.
Sean, if you can take a moment and also talk a little bit about sort of what the legislation has in store for us right now, and if there have been any changes, or I know there have been changes. They were just announced this morning that Congress passed the stimulus package. But also, what do you anticipate might happen so that, again, if we're a small to mid-sized business, hopefully we haven't had to take such drastic measures as to lay people off yet. But if it's in the back of our mind, what should we be thinking about and expecting?
Yeah, so let's start with what we already know, which is that two things have happened in Washington, D.C. since this all started. And today, the breaking news is essentially that there's a stimulus package, a $2 trillion stimulus package, a good portion of which is for individuals and small businesses. There is a large portion of it that's for big companies. I imagine Boeing is not watching this presentation, but there will be some stimulus for that. But for smaller organizations, there's some help coming, largely for individuals. So I'm just reading up on this now, and it hasn't been signed yet or even voted on yet, so it could change still. But it looks to me like there's approximately $1,200 sort of one-time payment coming for individuals who are making $75,000 or less annually, $2,400 for couples, I assume married couples, making $150,000 or less, I think collectively, annually. And then it looks to me like there's going to be an additional amount on top of that for each child that a couple has or an individual has. What I heard was $500 per child. I heard somewhere else $600. I think it's $500, but I'm not totally sure. Just following the news as everyone else is on this. The other really big piece of this is the effects on unemployment insurance. And the state has a regimen for that, but the federal government largely pays into funds for the states to use for unemployment insurance. And what we've seen is that they're going to be increasing the amount of unemployment available to employees by $600 a week. And that's from the federal government. So it's actually quite a large chunk of money that can be added to the unemployment insurance. And unemployment insurance covers salary for some people, and then for a lot of workers, it's just a relatively low percentage of what they would otherwise be making. So this amount actually dramatically increases what unemployed individuals can be receiving from the state for unemployment, and it also extends the amount of time that unemployment is available through basically the end of the year, 2020, and then this new law will sunset at that point. It also expands who can claim unemployment. So this is kind of a big deal. Independent contractors, people who are self-employed, typically not able to claim unemployment insurance because they haven't been paying into the unemployment fund in most cases, and they're just not subject to employment laws. And so what the federal government guidelines have done here, what it looks like it's going to do when it's passed, is allow gig economy workers in particular, but self-employed people generally, to, for the first time, claim unemployment insurance. So one thing I was planning to say today is that the EDD benefits aren't available to everyone. And I'm going to backtrack on that now and say, if you've seen a substantial reduction in your work, even through self-employment or independent contracting work, I say reach out to the EDD and see if you're available for benefits. The worst thing that could happen is they deny the claim. I mean, be honest, of course, in your situation, but it looks to me like once it's passed, there will be some funds available for self-employed individuals as well.
Well,
Roman, I mentioned that there are two changes. That's the one we're tracking today. Another one that I'm tracking is a law, and I'm going to quote it here. It's called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act that the president signed just a few days ago. And it looks like it's going to expand sick time benefits available to people who are currently employed. And so California, of course, has sick time laws. San Francisco has sick time laws. There's not a federal law. So this is a sort of a first of its kind law. I will note I'm still navigating my way through this because it's kind of vague and a little bit broad as worded. And so there's some question about who is subject to this. I can say if or similar to the state law, if you are affected by the coronavirus directly, as in you are sick yourself or you're helping care for a close family member who's been affected, you will definitely be subject to this new sick time law. And then what I'm looking into, I'm not totally sure as I sit here at the moment, is whether you're just forced to work at home, or I should say you're put on a furlough, whether you can claim the sick time benefit. It appears the answer is yes. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's some litigation over this, just given how vaguely it's worded. And the government is putting out guidelines for this literally as we speak. And I think those guidelines will actually provide some clarity. And I've got one we can look at when we get to showing some websites here. And so, if you're an employer, this is good news, bad news. So the good news is employees will get some sick time benefits. That's a good thing. Hope to get them through this tough time. The bad news is, guess who has to pay for that? The employers, right? So employers are struggling too, especially if sales have gone way down or if there's no customers to sell to. And so the government is providing a tax credit on the back end for this. Might be helpful, might still put the employer in a tough spot. And I think this has a little bit of an unintended consequence, which is it may cause some employers to consider layoffs more carefully than they would have otherwise. They might have been okay with a furlough, and now if they're getting hit with a substantial sick time cost for employee payroll, that might be tough. So it's this sort of an unintended consequence that I'm not excited about for both my clients and for the public in general. But it is nice that there are some efforts being made to provide sick time for individuals.
Sean, as I was listening, I'm trying to keep all the questions in mind, but one of them, and obviously there's a lot of changes taking place. There's also a lot for employers to keep track of and different resources. And I know that you're going to share some of them with us. But if I'm a small to mid-sized business owner, I'm the employer, and I've just listened to you, which made me think that I need to certainly look into this some more. What are the key resources where we should reference and go to? Do we go to the state Do we
Yeah.
call an attorney, or do we do some research on Google? Where would you recommend people go?
I'm going to say all of the above, actually. Of course, as an employment attorney, I will always say, find a good one, consult with them. It's not all that expensive just to have some consultations with a lawyer that can give you some guidance on what to do. I'm certainly happy to do it. There are lots of great lawyers in the Bay Area who do this kind of work. But definitely consult with somebody so you don't fall into any of these traps and that you make the right choices. But in the meantime, before you do that, there's the best place to look is at the state. So the state is the sort of the conduit for the benefits. And even though the federal government just is working on this new stimulus law, it appears to me that you're still going to apply for benefits through the state. And the agency in California that handles this is the EDD, the Employment Development Department. They have a pretty good website that has been updated a lot lately to cover coronavirus issues. We're going to show that screen in a little bit, but essentially they are giving some FAQs and guidance to both individuals and businesses on what to do in these circumstances. So they talk about what to do if you have a reduction in hours for your staff, what to do if you're doing a furlough, and what to do if it's full-time layoffs. And there's even a hotline it looks like they've set up where you can call somebody at the state to ask questions. And I can tell you they're largely going to probably try to get you to keep your people as employees and just do a furlough rather than a full layoff. The website seems to indicate that's their preference. But there's that resource too. And so if you just have some simple questions about benefits, it looks like there's a government person who can answer those questions. I would assume there's going to be a long wait time for that phone call. So, do some dishes or something while you're waiting, but it's out there. And then in addition to that, the federal government is already starting to put out resources as well. So the Department of Labor has some good coronavirus information that's, not necessarily to do with benefits, but just general information. And then this Family First Coronavirus Act, Family First Coronavirus Response Act also now has a web page on the Department of Labor's website. And there's a whole bunch of stuff already up there on the Department of Labor about coronavirus and what to do. So that's another good resource to go to in addition to the state government. And the next thing I'll mention that not everyone might be aware about is the Small Business Administration. It's a government entity, and people all talk about SBA loans and maybe not always understand what that is. But SBA loans are available through government assistance in a lot of situations, and in particular, SBA loans are available for disaster assistance. So you may have heard during Katrina, during hurricanes, during tornadoes and floods, different situations like that. Government will set aside stimulus money through SBA loans, and they've done that for coronavirus. And so I already know a lot of my clients are looking into this. It's sba.gov is their website. And it doesn't hurt to look, even if you might not meet the eligibility requirements. It's out there. Definitely check it out. And I see the little website thing down in the bottom left corner on the screen here. The other one is just dol.gov, departmentoflabor.gov. So all three of those websites have information. The SBA loans, of course, can provide some money. If you meet the eligibility requirements, obviously you have to pay that money back. But when we're dealing with short-term work stoppages, a loan might just be the saving grace for some of these smaller businesses who know they can get back up and running in the summertime or in the fall when some of the restrictions are lifted. So definitely take a look at that. I think most small businesses who've heard about it already are, so don't get left in the dust, so to speak. And that's another resource I think people should be aware of.
Thanks, Sean. You just mentioned, so the resources are helpful, but you've mentioned a little bit about furloughs, and I know that is, at least for me and some of the folks that I've talked to, some of our small business owner clients that have called in, not very familiar with how furloughs work. I don't know if you want to take just a moment to talk about that. And in addition to that, as a bolt-on, I just heard this morning as part of the announcement of the stimulus bill that they're planning on helping businesses finance the furloughs, because obviously they would like to have our corporate America, both small, mid, and large, retain as many people, continue to pay them, and hopefully get back to work as soon as this is over. Yeah,
I think that's right. I heard something like that too, and I'm not totally clear on the details yet, as obviously a lot of it's happening behind closed doors and we're just learning about it. But I would say the majority of the $2 trillion stimulus money is going to businesses, not individuals. So some of it's very obviously earmarked for companies that are gigantic, to help them navigate the storm here. But some of it is definitely earmarked for small businesses. I don't know yet if it's just going to increase the amount available for SBA loans or if it's going to be some direct stimulus. But definitely keep track of what is happening, and the Department of Labor might post a new page about that as well. It hasn't passed yet. I heard the Senate might vote on this on Friday. But once it passes, it looks like there will be some options available for small businesses to reach out, just like an individual would, and request benefits, essentially. I don't yet know how much money is available for that.
So sounds like we'll stay tuned and call you when we hear something else.
Yeah, just follow the news on that. I think, it's getting reported. It's a big deal. So, I think once it passes, the law will be written up and we'll all get to see it. I'm sure somebody will put out a how-to, to get the benefits for small businesses. The government's usually really good about posting that on their own websites. And in this case, there are so many government bodies at work. There's likely to be several different resources. If you go to the U.S. House website, house.gov, the U.S. Senate website, the White House will probably put out something. Department of Labor will probably put out something. So there'll be several places throughout the government, the federal government, where there will be information on how to claim the benefits. So definitely keep an eye out for that.
Sean, any industries that might be getting benefits or some additional relief from the government than others? Any particular carve-outs that you'd wanted to mention?
Yeah, I did want to mention one thing in particular that affects San Francisco artists and art organizations. And so the mayor of San Francisco, Mayor Breed, just announced a couple of days ago a new stimulus. I think she said about $2 million available for individuals in the arts community who are, of course, not able to perform right now or do their art. It's also earmarking money for arts organizations, which I think is also very helpful, because a lot of these businesses are nonprofits. They don't operate with any sort of large amounts of working capital. They often rely on donations from their viewers or their patrons. And so artists are particularly hit hard by this work from home situation. And so as of now, there isn't anything posted about how to claim the benefits, but there is a press release from Monday, so 2 days ago, that was put out by the city of San Francisco. It's also asking for some donations potentially from wealthier individuals who want to help this organization. And so it says here that they are going to post something online about how to claim the benefits for that or how to look into it. But I don't see that it's been posted yet. So we'll stay tuned for that. And then sort of in the state.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there a website that or the name of that organization that you want me to post so that if folks who are listening to this are in the arts space, that they can reference and keep abreast of the changes?
I think that it's called the Arts Loan Fund, and I'm basing that off of the press release from the mayor. I'm not 100% sure. That's definitely listed in the press release. The sfmayor.org has this press release on it, which is what I'm looking at now. And again, it mentions
sfmayor.org. Is that the address?
sfmayor.org.
Okay, so we just put that up on the screen. Hopefully that'll give you some additional.
Yeah, I'm seeing the Arts Relief Program, I think is what they're going to call it, $2.5 million from the city of San Francisco, Arts Relief Program. And there's references here to the Arts Relief Fund. The Arts Loan Fund. And so there's a couple things that are going on with this. Some of it's a grant, but some of it's low interest loans. And I think the Arts Loan Fund is the loan portion of this. It's essentially low interest loans for arts and cultural organizations, and may help them weather the storm here a little bit. So a lot of moving parts here. We're following this almost on a day-to-day basis as things are changing. The press release here specifically says there's no website set up for this yet, but they expect to have it soon. But yeah, the Arts Loan Fund, at least you can go look over there for the potential loan options if you're an arts organization. And there's also a link here to it's give to the number 2 sf.org, where they're seeking tax deductible donations to help with this fund. If you're a wealthy individual, that might be something you're interested in. Certainly, this is near and dear to my heart. My wife is a musical theater choreographer and director. I work very closely with several arts organizations, including some that are my clients. So I think this is a good thing. San Francisco is an arts hub in the United States. Hopefully it'll help some people. Looking a little more globally, or I should say statewide, we're waiting to see what specific industries might get some relief. And so there's a lot of stuff happening in Sacramento, either remotely or in person, I'm not sure. But I've heard some rumors about some increases to sick time and vacation time benefits from the state. I've heard some discussion about maternity and parental leave benefits that they might be adding to or changing. So it's all right now sort of being addressed at the state level, and we'll see if they target specific industries or if they try to help independent contractors the way this federal stimulus appears to be designed to help the gig economy workers. We have a lot of gig economy workers in the state, and so I wouldn't be surprised if the state themselves targets those individuals for some relief. They wouldn't otherwise have been eligible for unemployment for the most part. I see a comment over here, a question about the difference between a furlough and a layoff. Do you want me to answer that question?
Yes, please.
Okay. So thank you for that question. That's a good one. So I say furlough. It's a fairly common term used. The state says temporary layoff. So that's the term the EDD uses. Apologize for the dog in the background. It's
a bring your dog to work day, or actually stay at home and work day.
Yeah, she heard something outside, I think. But a furlough is a temporary layoff as far as the state is concerned. And what that means is the people who work for a company will stay on the payroll. They'll stay on the W-2 list. You don't have to retrain them, rehire them, and they're still essentially employees within the meaning of the law. Whereas a layoff or a permanent layoff means they cease to be employees with you and would have to be rehired, or if new individuals were hired instead of the prior individuals, then you'd have to do some training for those people to get them up to speed. And so essentially it's a permanent parting of ways versus a temporary parting of ways. And the furlough, since it keeps employees on the book, does mean that employers might have to continue to honor leave laws. Well, they definitely should honor the leave laws that are in effect, sick time, vacation time, if applicable, PTO, pay time off. So all of those benefits that employees have remain in place during a furlough, whereas they may not during a layoff. It may be the case that if employees are laid off for the entire month, that certain benefits like medical insurance, health insurance, dental insurance could be abated or temporarily stopped. The contributions might be stopped. That's something you have to look into with your health plan providers. It's always subject to whatever plan you've signed up for and what the written documents say for that. And you would notify them of a change in employment status with certain individuals, and you should do that no matter what. So if you're reducing hours substantially for individuals, if you're doing a furlough or temporary layoff, or if you're doing a full layoff, you do need to let your benefits plan providers know so that they can change in their system whatever needs to be changed, which might affect employee benefits, for better or worse. And some employers would like to continue to honor healthcare coverage during this time, notwithstanding the reduction in force. And I think that's admirable if you're able to do that as an employer. These things all affect the EDD benefits as well. A temporary layoff or a substantial reduction in hours will still allow individuals to claim unemployment insurance benefits. So it's not the case that if you don't lay them off, you won't have to worry about the unemployment insurance. That's still something the EDD is granting benefits on. And if anything, they seem interested in expanding those benefits. So that's a lot of what's happening in Sacramento right now. So I've already seen a situation with one of my own clients where somebody had gone down to essentially just being on call before we all started sheltering from home, applied for EDD benefits, and it was granted. Essentially, the EDD found that the person was willing and able to work, just there weren't certain hours available for them, and therefore they were entitled to benefits, even though they were still a current employee, essentially on furlough. So that's how they are appearing to approach it at the state. And so don't be surprised if you see your employees applying for unemployment insurance, if you're getting notices. Respond. If you're an employer, definitely respond truthfully to those notices. And then, on the back end, there's a fund that employers pay into through payroll tax and various mechanisms in order to sort of fund the unemployment insurance accounts that the state draws from. So you may be required to replenish those accounts as an employer.
That's great. Thank
you. Done through taxes.
Sean, is it okay if I share your contact information in case folks have questions? Can they reach out to you for things like this?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to put it up on the bottom. So you've just mentioned a lot of really helpful tips, and want to make sure that if folks have additional questions that you either haven't addressed in this talk, that they can reach out. Is there anything else that you wanted to share? Maybe take us through how do people actually apply, or is that going to be too long?
I do want to, let's do a little bit of a screen share here if you've got time.
Okay.
And, I'll show you a couple websites. I don't know if I'll go through the application process. It's fairly straightforward, and the EDD is there to assist people if they need help with it. Essentially, it involves either filling out paper forms or there's an online application process. But I will show you the EDD website here, and we can poke around there just a little bit.
Okay.
Great. So this landing page here is for the coronavirus, obviously. And so this is what the EDD has generated and where to go to find information about this. And so there's a lot of things that I talked about on here. So if you've got quarantined or sick workers, there's some information here about how to file for disability insurance, which is something I haven't actually mentioned here today. Then, if there's employees at home doing caregiving, essentially paid family leave can come into play. Obviously, there's some school closures that might require people to work from home that would subject them to eligibility for certain kinds of benefits as well. In fact, right here in the middle of the page, there is a link, file for an unemployment insurance claim. So it's right there. Maybe we'll even click on that and see where it goes in a minute. But that's where you can go to do it. If you've got reduced work hours for your staff, there's some information here. Again, another link about filing a claim and how much benefits may be available for that claim. And then here's a note about self-employed individuals, which is subject to change right now based on what the federal government's doing today. But you can see right here, there's a link to a self-employment independent contractor page where there's some information about your options there. And if you're an employer, there's some information too about related OSHA safety guidelines. There's a CDC link here that's kind of interesting if you want to go look at that about coronavirus, and mostly on the health side of things. And then here's where I was talking about what to do if you want to reach out to somebody for the state. Down here in the bottom, sort of on the right, in the middle of the page, there's this thing that says Rapid Response Services for Business fact sheet, which gives some information. And then there's some phone numbers to call for tax assistance. And somewhere in here, there's an option to connect with somebody at the Rapid Response team. I think it's right here where it says America's Job Center of California. So that may be outsourced organization of some kind, but those people are going to try to talk you out of doing layoffs, but they may answer some questions for you as well as an employer. And then another thing that's a little bit interesting that some employers might qualify for is this unemployment insurance work sharing program. I'm not a total expert on that yet, but you can see it's right here at the top of the page with a link to visit the work sharing program to learn more about those benefits. And it's designed for these kinds of situations where you have people who are unable to come into work, and there may be a way to sort of band with other employers in order to reduce the overhead on individuals and get some benefits out of it through unemployment insurance. So definitely poke around there. I'm not quite equipped to answer questions about how that particular program all works, but I'm reading up on it as well, and I'm sure we'll be able to talk about that if anyone ever reaches out to me with those kinds of questions. And since we're on this page, I'll go ahead and just click on the File for an Employment Insurance Claim link. We'll see where that takes us. And you can see there's some information here about how to do it, what information you would need in order to give to the government. And then there's a nice little thing right here to file online. Tells you the hours that you can do that. They typically will call you if you're an individual who filed a claim, and they do a phone interview with you about how, what your situation is, what you're seeking and why. And then, if you don't want to do it online, there's a way to do it by phone. and a way to do it by fax or mail. I think mail in this day and age is a little bit of a disfavored method, but it's there. So there's lots of information available on these government websites that I think a lot of people can get their answers answered before having to necessarily turn to a lawyer. And then back on the coronavirus page here again, I just want to point out another link over here in the right side that says COVID-19 FAQs. And that just takes you to another page at the EDD that has even more information about disability benefits, paid leave benefits, and other things. In fact, down here at the bottom, I see there's a new link that I don't think was there a couple days ago about the WARN Act, probably. So I imagine that's down. Yes, there's some, as I said, the governor just announced some reductions on the 60-day notice requirement for the WARN Act. So it looks like they just updated this website to include that here. So this FAQ has a lot of information as well that we can all learn from, I think, about what our options are.
Thanks, Sean. That was very, very helpful. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention before we sign off?
No, just that we're tracking what's happening in the federal government. I think there will be some changes. I'm not yet sure the full scope of the Family First Response, Coronavirus Response Act yet, but I think that it goes into effect in April and will require employers to pay some sick time to employees that they weren't expecting to have to pay. So something to look into. There is a website that just went up for that at the DOL. In fact, I can share that as well real quick, and we can just see what it looks like. I'm still reading through this all myself, but it is there. All right, so I just shared that in case you can see it. So this is the Department of Labor's website on this brand new thing that was just passed, sort of a first of its kind sick time law for federal law. So we're still figuring out who's eligible for sick time under this. I think there's a good bet that anyone who's forced to work at home, forced to shelter in place and is not working, may be eligible for the sick time benefit, whether or not they are actually sick or caring for a sick family member. So employers should look into this, definitely read this website and go from there. And I'm doing the same thing. And it may look like you should pay some benefits coming up here soon to individuals who are on extended leave and not able to perform work from home.
Stuff, Sean. Thank you. So I was just taking some notes while you were talking. Quite a few notes, but I would say that in sort of summary, what I'm taking away from this is that if you're a small to mid-size business and you think this ongoing shelter in place might impact your business, definitely consider your options and make a plan about how you can continue to navigate this shelter in place for an extended period of time that may be affecting your business. Don't be afraid to take advantage of the resources that Sean just went over. I think it was the EDD, DOL. Sean, what was the third?
The Small Business Administration loans.
The SBA loans,
Yeah.
which, right, so there's special lending options that are now available through the SBA specifically for businesses affected by COVID-19. Obviously, stay in contact with the state online or with an employment law attorney such as Sean. And I've got your email displayed below. So if you have any questions, Sean, thank you for offering to assist. I know that you also have a very large network of other folks that can help in this realm, including HR consultants if they're needed. I know they can't give the legal advice that you can,
Right.
but very, very helpful nonetheless to get the perspective and have somebody really hold your hand and guide you through the process of managing your employees better through this crisis and beyond. So hopefully we can all emerge stronger and better. And just want to put in another quick plug for Sean's firm, AdAstra Law Group, which is a phenomenal, very well-respected firm here in San Francisco in the Bay Area. Want to say thank you again for the time that you've taken. And if there's anything you want to mention, please, this is a good time.
No, I just want to say thank you. I was when I saw you were doing some of these shelter from home webinars, I was very interested because I just realized that this is something that everyone is grappling with right now.
Right.
It's changing on a daily basis, quite literally. Employment is obviously a huge part of what drives our daily lives, both as business owners and as individuals. So I hope that people learn something from this and are able to find some resources to help themselves either individually or for their businesses and their employees. And then, quick shout out to the artists in the community here. I hope you're able to get some relief from what the city of San Francisco might be putting together, either for small loans or some grant money. So definitely go look at that too if you're in that community.
Thank you, Sean, again. Thanks everybody for watching, and be well, stay healthy, and we'll see you on the flip side where things will be better.
Hey, Roman, can I say one other thing? I see a comment from a wonderful HR consultant over in the comments there, who runs or is the founder of People 415, which is one of the HR consultants I've used. And so if you're watching this and you are,
we just decided to spotlight her. So Becky, thank you.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Becky because I know that she's hands-on with this stuff right now. She's helping her own clients navigate this the same way I am. And so, if you are looking for an HR consultant, you don't necessarily need a lawyer. They are out there. There's some good ones. One of them was watching apparently, and I'm excited to see that. And so I wanted to give a shout out.
Thank you. In fact, I think Becky is going to be on one of these talks in about a week or so.
Awesome.
And later on this week and next week, just keep coming back to the Pillar 6 website on Facebook or on LinkedIn. We've got really thoughtful professionals in different areas like Sean, who are willing and able to really help and to lay out some helpful tips to help all of us get through this difficult time and emerge stronger and better. So, Sean, thanks again. Be well.
Thanks, Roman. Thanks for hosting these. This is great.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.